I was sitting in my car one day and I needed to find a street that I was unfamiliar with, so I turned to my Thomas Guide, that book of maps of city streets. I don't remember which street it was I was looking for, only that began with the letter S, but when I thumbed through the index, what I got distracted by were all these columns of streets whose names began like Santa Monica Boulevard, San Pedro Street, St. Louis Street. There were all these places named for saints, in a city named for a saint. And the phrase just jumped into my head, Todos los Santos de Los Angeles, all the saints of the City of the Angels. I knew enough of early California history to know that Spanish explorers and Mexican settlers would name places for saints in the hope and expectation that the saints would have some impact on the place bearing her or his name. I knew also that after the Yankees, the Americans, came and took control of California, and Los Angeles in particular, they sort of brushed aside the culture that had been here before, and then they began rebuilding it, sort of commercializing the past, and would name places for saints without much knowledge of who those saints were. I asked myself if there might be some connection between the history of the streets named for saints and the stories of the saints those streets are named for. The fact that they were named without that intent only made it more interesting to me if I could find a connection. I divided the city into quadrants, and each year I would research the history of that area of Los Angeles, all the streets named for saints in that area, and then the stories and legends of the saints for whom those streets are named. After I gathered all of my research, then I would go and visit the streets, take photographs, and try to see if I could find the spirit of the saint, shall we say, on the street bearing her or his name. I would come back to my studio with my photographs, with my knowledge of what the street actually looks like, what life is like on that street. Combine that with the research that I'd done on the saint as well as on the street in the area, and try to see how I could best tell that story. In some cases, it was using art historical imagery based on some well-known icons of the saints, putting them in a contemporary setting. And in some cases, it so happened that I encountered people during my time on the street whose experience converged in a way that made them the perfect vehicle for telling the story. San Isidro Drive in Bel Air is named for San Isidro Labrador, who was a 13th century Spanish farmer who had to hire out to work in the land of the wealthy to support his family. What I noticed is the only people on the street are Latino, perhaps Mexican, day laborers and gardeners, who essentially are living out their lives as contemporary San Isidros. I approached one of the gardeners, asked if he would be willing to pose for me as a contemporary San Isidro. He assented to this, and I think there's something about the combination of dignity and humility and strength that's conveyed in his portrait as a modern San Isidro that communicates everything that I would want to say about how those two stories converge. I suppose the thing that I could not have anticipated would occur is the extent to which these stories would deal with difficult social issues of our history, moments of conflict between peoples. These were the stories that arose when I began to connect the history of the street and its neighborhood and the story of the saint whose name the street bears. I'd like to think that the paintings and stories that we've selected for this exhibition afford visitors a couple of insights. One would be an appreciation of how rich and how long our history is here in Southern California, and also an appreciation of what people have gone through here. It's also a celebration of some creative ways that people have responded to conflict and to difficulty. Provides in that regard hope for how we can move forward as a variety of communities that can come together to create one strong, larger community, the City of the Angels.